السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون الله يستهزئ بكم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى فما ربحت تجارتهم وما كانوا مهتدين مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا فلما أضاءت ما حوله ذهب الله بنورهم وتركهم في ظلمات لا يبصرون صم بكم عمي فهم لا يرجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات
Thank you for joining for the program for the 27th night of Ramadan. We'll now invite Shaykh to continue with the lecture. Salawat.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان رضي الله عنهم ورضوا عنه وأعد لهم جنات تجري تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها أبدا ذلك الفوز العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. These nights of the past week that we've been together, I've been discussing different companions of the Ma'sumin and telling you a story about each of them and trying to derive some lessons that we can learn from so we can emulate them, or in cases where they've made mistakes, so we can also learn from their mistakes and avoid those particular mistakes. The companion I want to discuss tonight is a companion of the 6th and the 7th Imams. His name is Ishaq ibn Ammar al-Sayrafi. Sayrafi, like with many of the other companions, this is an indication of his occupation. In Farsi they say Sarrafi. A Sarraf is somebody who is a money changer. Right? So in those days you take your dinar or your dirham and he would exchange it for another kind of currency or another weight or this or that. So a person who does this as an occupation, a money changer, not a money lender, but money changer, is called a sayrafi or a sarraf in Farsi. So this was his occupation. And it plays a role in some of his ahadith and the story that I'm going to tell you as well, because this was a lucrative business. You're dealing with money, and it was he is actually very wealthy. And there's one comment from the 6th Imam, if I'm not mistaken, where he says, قد يجمعهما لأقوام. And what he means is that sometimes Allah takes dunya and akhirah and He gathers both together in a single person. And some people only have tawfiq for the akhirah and they have no share of the dunya. And some people have the dunya but they have nothing to do with the akhirah. So in praise of, or maybe just not necessarily praise, but just in acknowledgement of Ishaq ibn Ammar's situation, he says he's one of those people that Allah has combined both deen and dunya into his life. So he is a companion of the 6th and the 7th Imams. He's transmitted many traditions from them. There are a few interesting, I think, hadith that have some story around them that I want to share with you. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the first tradition, he himself transmits this. He is in conversation with the 6th Imam, and he says, لما كثر مالي أجلست على بابي بوابا يرد عني فقراء الشيعة. So very interestingly, as he says, as I came into wealth, I employed a guard whom I put at my door in Kufa to turn away the poor Shia who would come to the door looking for a charity, to kind of control them and keep them away, turn them away. All right, so right there, that should raise some flags. Why is he doing this? So now he goes to Medina. So he says that فخرجت إلى مكة actually تلك السنة فسلمت على أبي عبد الله عليه السلام فرد علي بوجه قاطب غير مسرور. So he says that I went to Mecca actually for Hajj or for Umrah that same year, and when I went into I knocked at the door of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he gave me a frown, clearly showing displeasure to me. فَقُلْتُ جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ وَمَا الَّذِي غَيَّرَ حَالِي عِنْدَكَ. He sees that the way Imam Sadiq's treating him now is different from how he's treated him in the past. He says, what has changed your disposition toward me? The Imam's response to him is, الَّذِي غَيَّرَكَ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. The same thing that changed your state with respect to the believers. Right? So he's indicating that the change that you have now undergone in turning away poor people from your house, that is what has changed between you and me. That your changed policy with the believers, that you're now willing to turn the poor away from your home, has now changed my perspective about you. That if you're the kind of person who turns away poor people, then I can no longer treat you the same way as I treated you before when you were someone who welcomed poor people and who gave them charity. So now this is a highly praised companion of the Imam, someone who is trustworthy in ahadith. If he is the individual in the sanad, then he is a very strong link in that sanad. So how can that all be true? And he has this kind of akhlaq that you and I both recognize as being highly problematic, if not ethically wrong, that you turn away poor people when they come to your door. So he offers the following justification to the Imam for his actions. He says, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ Yes, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ إِنِّي لا أعلم أنهم على دين الله ولكن خشيت الشهرة على نفسي. He says, I recognize the fact that these are believers, that I have a duty towards them. But he says the thing that I was trying to avoid by creating this barrier between them and me is that I didn't want to become kind of that my wealth and the fact that I am giving charity to everyone and everyone's welcome in my house shouldn't become a source of notoriety for me. Meaning it shouldn't be that people think that I'm showing off, that I'm flaunting my wealth, that I'm trying to make a big name for myself, and with a pretense that I'm very generous and charitable, and everyone's coming to my house. I don't want that to become a way that my own ego becomes inflated, and that people start to see this as actually a negative thing for me. So he was trying to, in a way, balance these two things. One, he recognizes the virtue of being charitable. He is wealthy, and he sees this as a blessing from Allah. I have to give. But he didn't like the dynamic that people are now coming to him regularly, and he has an open door policy. Everyone comes, all the beggars come, and they know that they can get from him. Giving was fine for him. That was not the problem. Being generous with them was not a problem. But that fear of now showing off and having a bad intention, that this becomes a way that I become mashhur is the word, notorious as someone who has a big head and sees himself as a big benefactor of the poor and this and that. He didn't want that kind of negative attention from people. So it is a challenge. I don't know if you can sympathize with that, but it is a challenge. Even put money aside, even for other things, if you think of sometimes if a person is very regular with prayer in a family where prayer is not important, then sometimes the family might start, kind of roll their eyes and say, oh, he's bada namazi hai, he's always praying. And they kind of treat you as though you're some sort of a freak because you pray, because you're regular with this or that. And that can make you feel very uncomfortable. Then maybe you always feel a little bit shy about praying in front of them. You want to kind of go and hide yourself so they don't make that comment about you. Because you feel like they're treating you in a way that almost this is a notorious type of a thing that you're doing. And you're showing off, or you're showing how holy you are, and you're kind of rubbing it in their face, right? They become sensitive because they're not doing it. They have a guilty conscience. And they see that you are doing it. And instead of saying that, this is a virtue that he has, mashallah, he has it, I wish I had it, let me try to have it, they might, as a defense mechanism, make fun of you and demean you because of that virtue in a way to make themselves feel a little bit less bad because they're neglectful of the same thing. Right? Is that a dynamic that you can relate to? So that seems to be what he's also trying to escape from. He doesn't want that kind of negative attention attached to his charity and his generosity. So not that he doesn't want to give anymore. We can only presume because of his character and who he is, and the fact that he wouldn't, obviously be wrong to turn away the poor and not give to them anymore. He's definitely, still giving, but in ways that are more quiet, more private, more secretive, so he doesn't draw what he's perceiving as the negative attention of people around him. So that is a real concern, but the Imam doesn't buy it. Right? This is a shaitani tactic to get us away from virtue. Right? Shaitan can't stop me from doing it by just dissuading me outright. But if he can get into my head and make me feel like somehow maybe people are thinking something about me and that's why I should stop doing this thing, right? That's a very convoluted way that shaitan gets in my head and gets me away from doing what's virtuous. So we should recognize that that's shaitan, push him out, continue to do the good thing, but also be very attentive to your intention and do it in the best way. Like try your best to deflect that negative attention. But in the end, if that negative attention comes from the naysayers and the ones who are guilty and who don't have the virtue, there's no implication on you. You have to have a thick enough skin not to pay attention to that kind of negative talk, and do the virtuous act. Try to purify your intention the best that you can, and try to ignore those things that people say, or act in a way that makes it less likely that they'll say those things. Right? So those should be the strategies that we use. Not to say I'm going to give up this virtuous act, let me avoid it because I'm not sure about this or I'm not sure about that, and maybe it will lead to something negative. That is a trick that sometimes shaitan will play, and if we're not careful, we can give in to that. That we think that, I don't know if I have a good intention for doing this or that, and so let me not do it. That's not the solution. Go ahead and do it, but also work on the intention. It's better to do it with a weaker intention or a slightly impure intention that you're working on trying to fix than to not do it at all. Not doing it at all means zero virtue. Doing it with efforts to try to purify your intention means you have at least some, but probably very much more virtue and good deed and reward with Allah. So this is again one of shaitan's ploys that he tries to use to dissuade us from doing good deeds. from this start, the hadith kind of it meanders through a couple of different things. So the Imam is still in conversation with Ishaq ibn Ammar. He says, Ya Ishaq, ama alimta anna al-mu'mineen idha altaqaya fatasathaha ijtama'a bayna ibhamayhima mi'atu rahmatin tis'atun wa tis'una minha li ashaddihima hubban li sahibih. So from here, the Imam seems to be wanting to outline the benefits of the human-to-human interactions that we have. We have to think in the context of his problem. He was trying to cut himself off a little bit, close his doors, to turn those people away. Let me just give the charity in some other way where they're not coming to my house, people don't see them coming here, I'm not meeting with them. So he wanted to kind of separate himself from the people that he's helping and make it an anonymous kind of a donation. So it seems like the Imam is now trying to emphasize how important the person-to-person contact is across the board. In his circumstance between the rich and the poor, but even for friends and community members and fellow Muslims and all of these, the social contact is so important. And so he outlines some very kind of mind-boggling rewards that are there for the person-to-person contact that we have with one another. He says, don't you know that when two believers meet and they shake hands, he says that between the thumbs, when they shake hands, between the thumbs, there are 100 kind of levels of virtue that are there. But who gets what? What's the division of the virtue and the mercy between the two people shaking hands? He says 99 parts of that virtue go to the one who has more love for the other. If you think it's a very beautiful way to teach a lesson, right? Because now it's this fastabiqul khairat, the Quranic admonishment to race towards good deeds. Right? So our attitudes, and sometimes we have these formalities, mujamala, and ta'aruf, and takalluf, and these kinds of things, different cultures that please you first, and that's in its appropriate place with some things, but not with good deeds. When it comes to good deeds, we should not have an attitude of, no, please you go first. We should kind of elbow people out and say, no, me first. I want to get to the good deed first. If something good has to be done, I should not be so careless with my own record and so generous with someone else that I let them get the reward before me. This is a place to be selfish. Some trash needs to be picked up. I shouldn't say, let my kid go pick it up, let someone else go pick it up. I should race to go and do it myself so that I get the reward for it. Otherwise, I'm so arrogant. I feel like I'm set. I have plenty of reward. I don't need any more. I'm okay. My accounts are full for today. Or no, I'm always impoverished. I always need more. I should race. And so he's saying in this interaction, just in the shake hand that we do, that musahafa, in this tasahuf between two people, the one who has more love for the other, he gets more of the reward and more of this mercy that Allah is sending down on them. 99 parts go to the one with more love and 1 part to the other. The message seems to be, strive to love your brother, love your sister as you shake their hand. Strive to have compassion for them, to care for them, to show sincerity, to smile, to be warm towards them, to have goodwill. All those things that go into that love, try to bring it all to the fore and shake your hands with all of that love. So that's a competition between the two people. You're focusing, you're trying to smile more and try to be happier and try to show that I love you more. And he's also trying to do the same thing. Of course, that's going to lead to an arms race of mercy and love. What could be better than that? Each one's trying to outdo the other in goodness. Right? So it's a beautiful way to encourage us to shake hands first of all, to have skin to skin, person to person contact, and then to have a particular attitude as we're doing it. Then he says, فَإِذَا اعْتَنَقَ غَمَرَتْهُمَا الرَّحْمَةُ and then he says if they go further than that, than shaking hands, and they hug. And mu'anaqa or i'tanaq is to put your unuq, your neck, with the other person's neck, to go neck and neck with the person and give them a hug. So when they do that, then mercy just totally kind of drenches them both. They're both inundated with the mercy of God. Right? So that's also training us that this is something that we should be doing, that person-to-person contact, and this, even the hugging itself is something that's highly recommended. And then he goes on to talk about even kissing. So kissing on the cheek, for instance, then if they kiss, وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِذَلِكَ إِلَّا وَجْهَ اللَّهِ قِيلَ لَهُمَا غَفَرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمَا. Well, if they kiss and they want Allah's pleasure because of that, then the angels say, may Allah forgive both of you for all of your sins. فَإِذَا جَلَسَ يَتَسَاءَلَانِ قَالَتِ الْحَفَظَةُ بَعْضُهَا لِبَعْضٍ اعْتَزِلُوا بِنَا عَنْهُمَا فَإِنَّ لَهُمَا سِرًّا وَقَدْ سَتَرَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَا. So then he says that if the two people sit down, it's not just a formal handshake and hug and kiss. Now they sit down to talk. At this point, the Imam tells him that the hafadha is plural hafid, these guardian angels that are with these two people, they say let's leave them alone. Let's move away, because it looks like they have some private talk that they have to do, and Allah has given them this kind of sanctity to be able to talk privately. Let's move away. So that's all, I think, an interesting thing. I don't know if we pay enough attention to this. We have the Kiram Katibin. Most of us know this not because of the verse of the Quran, but because of Dua Kumail. Right? But it's in the Quran, in Surah Al-Infitar, these Kiram Katibin are mentioned. So we have actually two sets of angels, two pairs of angels with us. In Western popular culture, this idea of a guardian angel. So this is an Islamic concept. We actually have these hafadha, literally hafiz, an angel who's guarding us. So we have those angels that are in charge of recording our deeds. Right? Those are the ones that we usually think about, writing our good deeds, writing our bad deeds. But then we have these guardian angels that are mentioned in various verses of the Quran. They're referred to as hafadha. And these are angels that are charged with protecting us from danger, from harm, from death before our time. There's one hadith in Nahj al-Balagha, I don't remember the Arabic now, but the gist of it is that he says that we are like moving targets, and these arrows of death are constantly being shot at us, until finally it's our time to die. Once Allah decides that now it's your time to die, then the guardian angels back away and the next incoming arrow hits you. So you know how people talk about, and we experience this, you just like something just barely grazed you. 1 second this way, 1 second that way, one movement this way, one movement that way, you would have gotten hit, you would have gotten injured, car would have hit you. You were just about to step in the road, and the car went just before you. If you had, if it was 1 second later or 1 second earlier, you would have gotten run over. So those kinds of near misses, this hadith explains what's going on there. So Allah is the one who decides in His qadar for us, in His decisions for us, how long we're going to live, what is our ajal, and when is that death written for us. Before that time, anything else that comes my way that could be the source of death, that could be the cause of death, if it's not my time yet, then it won't kill me. It may not even injure me. It depends on what Allah wants. If He wants me to be injured, if He doesn't want me to be injured, if He wants me to even know that I had a near miss with death, or He doesn't want me to know. So He can decide all of that, but these guardian angels are there to protect me from those things that happen around me that could be harmful or even cause death, but it's before the time that Allah has decreed. So this is a reality that we have as well. So there are actually two sets of angels around us, four of these angels that are, on one hand, doing hifth of our a'mal, writing down our deeds, and on the other hand, doing hifth of our lives and our health and our persons by guarding against these different kinds of balaya and hardship. So the Imam is saying that when these two believers sit down, then those angels, here it seems like he's talking about the ones who are writing the deeds. They move away. Not the guardians, but the ones who are writing the deeds, they move away and let them have some space so they can talk freely without recording everything. So it seems that it's an indication of some sort of a grace, some sort of a like a less responsibility because of the benefit of sitting together and being together with the believer. The standard that you're held to and the accountability that you have to face is reduced, and the angels are moved away. So when Ishaq ibn Ammar hears this, he starts to think, well, if that's the case, that means there's no responsibility. If two believers sit together and they gossip, for instance, no one's there to hear, no one's there to record, right? So he takes it to the extreme and thinks that this means that there's some sort of a lifting of responsibility in this circumstance. So he says, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ وَتَسْمَعُ الْحَفَظَةُ قَوْلَهُمَا وَلَا تَكْتُبُهُ. Is it the case that they hear what he says but they're not writing it? Like, what exactly are you saying? When they move away from the gathering, are they not hearing and not writing? Or are they hearing but not writing? Or what's happening? Are we off the hook? No responsibility? So the Imam says, before we get to the Imams, he himself quotes the verse. He says, is that the case that they don't write? وَقَدْ قَالَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. Allah is the one who says that not a single word does the person utter, but that there's an angel present with him to hear every word, witness every word. So how does what you're saying fit with this verse from Surah Qaf? The Imam's response, he kind of puts his head down for a minute. He says, نَكَسَ رَأْسَهُ طَوِيلًا ثُمَّ رَفَعَهُ. Then he looks up. He says, وَقَدْ فَاضَتْ دُمُوعُهُ عَلَى لِحْيَيْهِ وَهُوَ يَقُولُ يَا إِسْحَاقِ إِنْ كَانَ الْحَفَظَةُ لَا تَكْتُبُهُ وَلَا تَسْمَعُهُ فَقَدْ سَمِعَهُ وَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِي يَعْلَمُ السِّرَّ وَأَخْفَى. So the Imam has this very emotional moment. He looks down for a minute and he looks up, and his eyes are streaming with tears. And he says, even if the two angels don't hear and don't record what the people are saying, and that's a mercy, Allah is basically preserving their dignity, the dignity of the two believers, by moving the angels aside. If the angels don't hear and don't write, but the one who knows every secret and what's even more hidden than a secret is still witness, and he still knows. So it's not the case that you're off the hook and there's no responsibility in this gathering. The mercy that Allah is giving you is just that He's preserving your dignity. He doesn't want to embarrass you in case you say something bad in front of the angels. So He's moved the angels aside. But you still have to face Allah and be accountable for whatever you say with Allah, who's witness to everything. Finally, the Imam says, خَفِ اللَّهِ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِنْ شَكَكْتَ فِي أَنَّهُ يَرَاكَ فَقَدْ كَفَرْتَ. Fear Allah as though you see Him. And if you have any doubt about whether or not Allah is witness to you and whether He sees you, then this is kufr. Then you haven't understood who Allah is. You've rejected Allah in His reality, that He is all-knowing, all-present. وَإِنْ أَيْقَنْتَ أَنَّهُ يَرَاكَ ثُمَّ بَرَزْتَ لَهُ بِالْمَعْصِيَةِ فَقَدْ جَعَلْتَهُ فِي حَدِّ أَهْوَنِ النَّاظِرِينَ إِلَيْكَ. And on the other hand, if you have certainty that God sees you, and you still have the gall to sin in front of Him, now your troubles are even worse. Now you have treated Him with such disrespect that you've considered Him to be ahwanun nadhirin, like the least important person who's looking at you. This is a phrase that comes in Dua Abi Hamza as well. Imam Sajjad tells us we're admitting our sins and saying, I've sinned against you not because I think you're ahwanun nadhirina ilay. وَأَخَفُّ الْمُطَّلِعِينَ عَلَيْهِ. Not because I think less of you, that, it's just God who sees me. No problem. It's only Allah. It's not because of that. It's because you're akramul akrameen. And because of your magnanimity, because you're forgiving, your generosity, it's those qualities that make me sometimes so bold that I sin, despite the fact that I know you see everything. Not because I think less of you and I don't regard you as something important to hide from. But the Imam's proposition, he makes it very difficult to sin then. Right? He says that seems to be why he's crying, because he's reflecting on this reality that while Allah has so much mercy on us that He's willing to push the angels away and guard our honor from the angels, but He Himself is always present and always witness. And whether if you don't understand that Allah is present, then that's a level of kufr, that you don't understand who God is. And if you know that God is present and He's witness, and you still sin, then you're treating Allah as though He's a nobody. I'm embarrassed if people find out what I did and what I said. But if it's just Allah, no problem. Right? That becomes our attitude towards Allah. If we're sinning, despite the fact that we know that He sees everything and knows everything, even knows my intention, knows what's in my mind, and I still have bad thoughts and I say bad things and do bad things, then what I'm communicating to Allah is that you're akhaful muttali'ina alayh, you're ahwanu nadhirina ilayh. You're the least important person to me and the one I'm least concerned about seeing me. May Allah protect us from that and give us both the certainty to know He's always present and also the taqwa to guard ourselves from Him and fear Him always. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alright, so that was one hadith I wanted to share. Another hadith I'll share with you also from Ishaq ibn Ammar. This is a hadith that has to do with the birth of his son. And so I thought it would fit very nicely with the parenting seminar that we had earlier. So Ishaq ibn Ammar comes to the Imam. This time it's also Abu Abdullah, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, فَخَبَّرْتُ أَنَّهُ وُلِدَ لِي غُلَامٌ فَقَالَ أَلَا سَمَّيْتَهُ مُحَمَّدًا. Ishaq comes to Imam Sadiq and says, I've been blessed with a son. And so the Imam's first advice to him is, why don't you name him Muhammad? Ishaq's response is, قَدْ فَعَلْت. I've already done that. I knew this recommendation. So one of just the lesson from this is the names that we choose for our children. This is one of the rights that a child has over the father, is to choose a good name. And so sometimes in our communities we try to be very creative with names. Let me think of the name that no one's thought of before. Let me go on and do Google searches and think of what are rhyming names and cute names and these sorts of things, instead of looking at what are good names from the Islamic perspective. So good names from the guidance we get from the Ahlul Bayt are names of good people. Right? So the best of people are the prophets. So naming your children after the prophets, after the imams, after pious people, after righteous people, awliya of Allah. So those names, regardless of what the meaning is, regardless of how it sounds to you, but naming your child after that person who is a role model and someone that they can look up to, that itself is a good name. Or names that have good meanings. So Abdullah, for instance, Amatullah, or anything in that name. So any other name but Allah, Abdul Razzaq. So those kinds of names that are showing servitude to Allah, these are highly recommended. So these are the kinds of names we should be prioritizing and choosing for our children, instead of those original and cute names that have no benefit for the child. So the Imam's first response is, why don't you name him Muhammad? That's the best of names to name your child. And we have the hadith I'm sure you're familiar with. If you have, I think it's 4 sons, and you don't name one of them Muhammad, then you're insulting Muhammad, Rasulullah. That I had 4 sons that Allah gave me, and I didn't even think about naming one of them after Rasulullah. That's an insult to Rasulullah himself. Is there some? All right, recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Then the Imam continues. He says, فَلَا تَضْرِبْ مُحَمَّدًا وَلَا تَسُبَّهُ جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ قُرَّةَ عَيْنٍ لَكَ فِي حَيَاتِكَ وَخَلَفَ صِدْقٍ مِنْ بَعْدِكَ. So his advice to Ishaq ibn Ammar is, this Muhammad of yours, a son of yours, don't hit him in your disciplining of him, and don't speak harshly to him. Don't do sab, putting him down, calling him names, saying negative things to him. So don't scold him with your words. Now these 2 things, we know there is a place in the Sharia for these things, but the reason the Imam is saying don't do these things is that the place for discipline, either physical or even scolding, is as a very last resort. Sometimes when we are exposed to Islamic teachings through fiqh, we get straight to the red lines and straight to the kind of the harshest part of it, and we think this is like maybe the first line of defense or the first line of discipline for the child. And that's clearly not the case. If you look at the fatwa and even a comprehensive look at the guidance that we get from ahadith, we're supposed to first use admonishment and teaching and encouraging and all those things that even our common sense and our common experience tells us are most effective with teaching our kids. Hitting them or yelling at them is not the first way to teach the child, and it's definitely not the best way to teach the child. It's the very, very last resort when nothing else has worked, if you think this is going to be effective. So with so many caveats, then there's some small place carved out for the permission to give a disciplinary spank, or to say something a little bit harsh or raise your voice a little bit, only because the other ways haven't worked yet. And that too, the caveat is if this is going to be effective. If you live in a society or a time, or your history with your child is that even a spank is not going to do anything, then you're not justified in even giving a spank. And in the case where you do use a spank, then the restrictions are very strict. You're not allowed to cause any bruising or any even redness. So it's just a symbolic type of a thing that I'm showing that this is a really serious matter. You're not listening. Nothing else has convinced you. I'm not able to correct you in any other way. As a last resort, just to show you how serious I am about this thing, I'm going to give you a spank with full control over my own anger. So it's not out of anger that I'm spanking, but it's to try to reform the child and get them to realize how serious the matter is. So with all of that, then we understand the Imam's admonition, don't spank him and don't ever raise your voice to him, is telling us in the default, as long as things go well and your good parenting bears fruit, then avoid these things at all costs. He says that Allah, either this is a statement or maybe a dua, may Allah make him a qurratul ayn, make him a source of pleasure for you as long as you live, and may He make him a great legacy for you after you die. That's a wonderful dua for anyone who's had a child. May Allah make him a source of pleasure as long as you live, and a legacy for you after you die, a good legacy for you after you die. Then Ishaq asks him, he's just born, right? And he's asking advice from the Imam. He says, "Ju'iltu fidak fi ayyil a'mal ada'uhu." What line of work should I put him in? That's his next question, right? For his newborn child. And that's also in line with the lesson we had earlier. That's not too early for these sorts of things. You may not, act on it and actually train the child from a young age for some career, but thinking about the future, thinking about the trajectory of that child's life, and starting to plan and think about it and arrange things and do the best you can to get them into the beneficial ways of life from an early age is very important. Even in terms of career, think about how, from a young age, we might encourage kids to have certain kinds of careers without any thought about how halal that line of work is, how beneficial it is, how useful it is, how good it is for their deen and dunya. But if it's prestigious, for instance, that might, even as a child, you have the child fantasizing about becoming, a very wealthy, financier, or someone who works for big banks and who does these sorts of things, and they're already idealizing those kinds of things when they're young. They want to be rich. And that's going to have an effect on what kinds of choices they make and how you raise them and how you encourage them. And that's going to be their life goal, even if they're still 4 or 5 years old and fantasizing and playing. So he's thinking ahead of the game, and he's thinking like, what kind of career should I guide him towards? So the Imam says, let me just confirm. We want to stop for a few minutes for some announcement. Is that the case? Who are the organizers? And when is Maghrib time?
Maghrib is
8:06. So we need to stop.
We need about 10-12 minutes.
Okay, let me leave this then. Inshallah, there are 5 things that the Imam is going to tell us that he should avoid. Avoid these careers at all costs, and anything else you then encourage him. So you want to see what are those careers that he's telling him to avoid. So inshallah, tomorrow I'll speak about those and then connect it to the next companion, inshallah. Allah, we ask you to shower your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Help us, Allah, to follow in the footsteps of the best of the Prophet and the Imam's companions. Help us to learn from their guidance. Forgive us for all of our sins. Keep us on the right path. Help us to raise our children to be qurratul ayn in our lives and legacies that are that bring pleasure to us and pleasure to Allah in the after our deaths. Salawat.